Shabbat Shalom LVE lineage, as well as all of our friends that accompany us today. On this precious day of Shabbat, that corresponds with the 24th of Ethanim of the year 5987 of the calendar that we believe to be the most accurate, and this also corresponds with the 24th of November of the year 2018, we are going to continue our study of the Bride of Yeshua, 41, YHWH Ekhad, 20. And we're going to study the second part, and from what I can see, it won't be the last, the second part of the new medicine, part 2. We're living the Shavuot 71. We're in times of destruction, when Yahweh deems necessary, feels like it, and it coincides with his plans. We're gonna witness the last events of this earth. But it could be delayed some time still. That can only be known and decided by the Creator. We're also on the 19th Shabbat of the Shavuot 71. Let's request the presence of our Creator. Our Father in heaven, we thank you, Lord, for giving us this precious Shabbat. We thank you for letting us celebrate this solemn and very happy Moed that is Sukkot. We thank you because you give us the opportunity to continue studying this subject of health that you designed and is in each and every one of us. We give thanks because in this Shabbat we can worship you and freely continue seeking and understanding the eternal truth. All this, Lord, we give thanks and we ask that your Spirit be in each one of us. In your precious name, Yeshua HaMashiach. Alleluia. All right, I'm not going to give any news because we're going to start with our study, always keeping in mind that Shemah is real. Like it says in the poster, YHWH Eloheinu, YHWH Ekhad. Yahweh is our only Elohim. We posted on Leslie's wall and mine a letter that's a gift for each and every one of you. Our friend, this is a gift for you with our most sincere desire. I wish you today a wonderful life wherever you are. I wish that your table be filled with foods and the most delicious delicacies you've always wanted to eat. I wish that you acquire good health, physical balance, emotional, and spiritual balance, and that your good mood allows you to do all the activities that bring you happiness. I wish that the place where you live be transformed into your kingdom, beautiful, precious, and sacred, where everything you deserve grows. Love, tenderness, joy, satisfaction, friendship, creativity, and happiness. That your home be the most beautiful place on earth. I wish that your mind be open to new truths, that your understanding grows to the possibility of new discoveries that'll help you grow as a human being. I wish that you discover what it is to give the best of yourself, to share your personality, which is neither worse nor better than that of others. You're a unique and an irreproducible being, and never again will there be another like you. I wish that the people that really help you feel happy and full arrive in your life. I wish that all those that approach you are people with the same desire to love, grow, and live in harmony. I wish that your path in this flat world is precious, original, with all its high peaks and low valleys. I wish that you see all the bad and negative things as experiences so that they make you strong, brave, courageous, and that you always find a solution to every problem that's presented to you. I wish that the light always shines from you and that it increases every day so that your life transforms into a shining star in the darkness. I wish you the best, today and always. Above all, I desire that your Creator never stop watching you, and that it be He who gives you the gift that'll last for all eternity. This is a gift letter for you, because you are our friend. We send greetings from Christian Silva and Leslie Silva. This letter was a deep desire of ours for each and every one of our friends. But this letter can also show you what kind of person you are. For example, all those that got emotional and even cried and were left deeply moved by the letter are people that know how to receive. And with knowing how to receive, with this act, it's almost certain that all these desires in this letter will be solidified in your lives because you know how to receive. Because by reading and believing, do you remember? This time, read and believe instead of believe, create. But by reading and believing in this gift, you'll receive it and you'll solidify it in many levels because your unconscious has received each and every one of these desires as a reality. Therefore, all those people from this point forward begin to look for these gifts because you will find them. Now, all those, just one second, let me open this. All those people that this didn't cause any emotion or very little emotion, or they're not worthy of a gift of that magnitude, of these kind desires, are people that use reason to receive. I receive something because I deserve it. I can't receive something that I don't deserve. For example, and let's see for what reason I should receive I. They use logic, they reason the gift. And there's other people that when one gives them a gift, they immediately look for ways to repay that gift. Oh, they give me this, I'll give them something else. Oh, they invited me to their house to eat, I also have to invite them to eat. If you feel the obligation to repay, it's because you don't know how to receive. When you feel that obligation because you invited me to your house, now I have to invite you to my house, then you're not accepting the gift. You saw it as a weight, and now you want to return that loan that they gave you because we don't know how to receive. But a gift has to be received unconditionally and without even thinking for a second that you're going to repay them somehow by some other form. Because that's what a gift is for. Because if I give you a gift and the next day you come with a gift much bigger, you're telling me I didn't accept your gift. I'm giving it back in a different way. Do you guys understand what I'm telling you? Understand what I'm trying to say? Okay. In psychology, when you feel the obligation to return a good deed, it's because the gift weighs on you and you feel it like a burden instead of receiving it. A kid whose father gives them a gift is not going to be thinking, now what do I give my dad? Because I have to give something back. The transmission was cut, so we reinitiated it. A kid, what he normally does is receive it with lots of joy. And he's not thinking about how to repay it. What am I going to buy my dad? What am I going to buy my mom? That can come up later in a different form, but not immediately. See, haven't you been to a friend's house saying, you invited me, next time I'll invite you? There, the gift was immediately returned and destroyed. The invitation completely destroyed because you're saying, because you invited me, now I'm going to invite you. Because if you never had invited me, I wouldn't invite you. But now I'm obligated to invite you. So, what kind of gift was that? None. None. It was no gift. It was only returning what you gave me, I'm giving it back. And so we're not people that have an open mind and the unconscious to receive. We can't receive because we're always thinking that we're not worthy. And if someone gives me something, I have to return it. I can't receive. I'm not in a condition to receive everything that this universe, we can say, the life that we live, is willing to give us. Neither will life give you anything ever if you don't believe you're worthy of something. If you don't believe you're worthy of something, you're never going to receive anything because you're not worthy. You're not opening the available channels to receive because you already blocked it. I don't deserve this. And if you don't deserve it, life won't give it to you. Because when it does, you won't even notice that it's being given to you because you already blocked. I don't deserve this. That's why all those that read the letter and were like, yeah, but it's not for me. The truth is, I couldn't really receive this. I don't deserve this. Or it didn't cause that emotion, or you're blocked in that aspect. Then you can't receive what life is giving you. Now, what do you have to do then? What you have to do is learn to receive. Learn to feel the gift, and you'll receive so much more than that gift. You'll start to see opportunities that come in form of a gift. But because we're blocked, we won't receive it. So then the good, the desire, the wishes are in each one of us. And the failures and the embarrassments are something positive because they're practical exercises to get to success and happiness. Lots of times we don't get to success or happiness in whatever area of our life because we have blocked our path to receiving. We think that if something's given to us, we have to return it immediately. And Yahweh will accompany us in everything. So then that was truly an example, apart from being an actual gift from us in truth, but it was also a sign so each one can check what they felt when they read the letter. And if you haven't read it, then read it. See what you feel. Legal notice, what I'm about to say from here forward, don't believe a single thing. I'm utterly and completely deranged. I say things against modern medicine, logic, medical reasoning. Don't listen to me at all. If something hurts, go running to the doctor. Because I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything of anything. I don't have titles for anything. And everything I'm about to say is a string of bullshit. It's a legal notice. So then I'm not a medic. I'm not going to treat you. I'm not treating anyone. It's complete and utter craziness of mine, of Hammer, of everyone else I'm going to cite. It's absolute craziness. So when something hurts, go run into the sane, the wizards, the enchanters that have title. So then at your own discretion and risk, you can continue watching. If when something happens to you, look for urgent treatment. I've never heard a legal notice as crazy as this one, but I hope it works because what I'm about to say has no common sense whatsoever. It's outside of science, against science, absolute craziness. Hosea 4:6-9, translated from the Jerusalem Bible 2001, says, "My people perish for the lack of knowledge." Why do the people die? Because you have rejected knowledge. I will reject you from my priesthood. I don't know how you'd say that now. From my priesthood, I don't know. I'll reject you from my Kohen because you have forgotten the laws of your Elohim. Did you know that the laws, the 5 laws of Hammer, aren't of Hammers? Hammer discovered them, but whose are they? Of Elohim's, exactly. Hammer can discover it and sign his name, but the laws that he discovered, someone created them. Who created them? Elohim. So because we forgot the laws, therefore, also I will forget about your children. The more they are, the more they sin against me. They've changed their glory for ignominy. They feed on the sins of my people. I could say they feed on the sickness of my people, and they crave their guilt, and they crave that they be sick. Can it be like that? Absolutely. But to the people shall have happened the same as the priest, or like the doctor. I will take notice of his deeds, and I will pay them for their actions. Very well. Let's continue learning what is the new medicine to escape the general, collective hypnosis that we have. Believe, create all the time. It's something that we should always have present. And the body, what is it? The body, what is it? A definition I've taught. Body is a reflection of the soul, apart from the temple. It's well said the body is the temple of Elohim, but the body is the reflection of the soul. What happens to the body when I see a symptom in the body is not that it was born in the body. Where was it born? In the soul. In the soul it was born. Very well. We're only going to go over the first law because now we're going to study the second law. But what does the first law say? Who discovered all this? Reiki Gear Hammer. That I call him Moses Hammer because he's the one who wrote the Torah, the laws of the medicine, the true medicine. He died about a little over a year ago, July 2017, the 2nd of July 2017, exactly during the Shavuot 70, closing the last light that I believe Elohim is going to give this earth. With that, it closed. But see that here there is no coincidence. If you ask when did he die, and they say he died in a random date, no. He died exactly closing a cycle in humanity. In the 70th week of the state, or the start of the state of the fig, that is Israel. It's impressing from whatever perspective you see it. He died exactly in the moment that we understand that fig begins to die. That is exactly the 70th week. That's why we say that we're in week 71, the time of destruction. But it's the same as if it were 71, 72, 73, 81, 83. It's the same, but I don't want to deceive you, but it's the same because it's passing the 70th week. How long will it take for this world to die? That I don't know. I don't know, you don't know either. Only Elohim knows that. Could it happen today? Yes, of course it can happen today. Would I like it to happen today? Absolutely, I'd love for it to happen today. But evidently, if it's not happening, it's because Yahweh has a specific plan. A specific plan. Very well, the 5 biological laws. And they're laws because they're not estimations. They're not statistics. They're laws that are meant even if you don't like it, even if you don't accept it. Even if you don't accept it, that doesn't matter because they'll be executed regardless. It's like as if you open the door and it's raining outside and you don't accept that the rain is going to wet you because you're tough, a badass, and you say, no, I'm going to go outside and I'm not going to get wet. And just like that, you go outside. What's going to happen? But it doesn't matter how much you believe you won't get wet. That doesn't matter. It's a law that if it's raining, you're going to get wet. So then, an intelligent person, knowing the law, opens an umbrella, protects himself, takes precautions for what? so that that law doesn't affect you. It's like a guy who goes to the top of a tall building, 40 stories high, and says, I don't believe in this law that we could call gravity, badly said, we could call the law of attraction or the law of volume, whatever. But I believe I'll be floating. And he says, no, I don't believe in that law for any reason. What happens if he jumps from the 40th floor? He's going to discover very quickly that that law does exist at a very fast velocity. Therefore, these laws of hammer are obeyed, yes or yes. There's a lot of official confirmations in different universities signed by many doctors. But what happened? They couldn't publish it or make it public. For what reason? Because their business would fall, and they'd have to give reasons for why millions and billions of people have died in hands of the medics. And because they can't face it, they have no other choice but to say it doesn't exist. But those laws do exist, totally. Now, the first law that is fulfilled without exception, always. The first law is the iron law of cancer, that afterwards he reformed before dying, and he titled it the iron law of all sicknesses. But the first one he wrote is the iron law of cancer, or onco-equivalent diseases, which means equivalent to cancer. Okay, so it has 3 criteria. This is what we studied last time, but I want to repeat it. It has 3 criteria, and without any room for doubt. If you want to comprehend, not understand completely, just comprehend and remove that fear of what our sickness is and comprehend better, you have to rewatch these studies and understand every point I give, not just that you heard it and yeah, I have a notion. No, the notions don't work for anything. Here you have to learn the laws. Just like we have to learn the laws to drive, we have to have a good handle on them. Well, these are the biological laws. This is what has to be learned at the least. So then, the law of cancer, the iron law of cancer, or the diseases, the onco-equivalent, or the diseases equivalent to cancer, has 3 criteria. First criteria, all SBS. What does SBS mean? What exactly does SBS mean? Jacob, what does it mean? No? Luz? Armando? Hector? Brenda? Nelson? Gavi? Ale? Who else do I need? Audrey?
Syndrome?
Agustin?
I'm reading it. Biological syndrome special? Well, I don't know if this is
Biological
good.
syndrome? What video did you watch?
Biological syndrome?
It wasn't a video from the Eternal Truth. It wasn't the video from the Eternal Truth. What does SBS mean? Because today we're going to develop the SBS in its
It's
completion.
an acronym in English, I understand.
Yes, but I want you to tell me what it means in Spanish because I've told you multiple times. I'm going to tell you now. Special program with a biological sense. In English, it's significant biological special program. But it doesn't matter what it says in English.
SBS for us, what is it?
Special program with a biological sense. In other words, every disease is a special program with a biological sense. And it has its origin in a DHS. What does DHS mean? Faster. Exactly. Dirk Hammer syndrome. And who was Dirk Hammer? The son of Moses Hammer. That is, Reichigir Hammer, aka Moses Hammer. It was the son that received a bullet to the leg. They amputated. And after a brutal fight, died. Thanks to him, our Dr. Hammer discovered that when there's a biological crash or a DHS, that he baptized that special event with his son's name. That emotional crash that we're going to talk about it right now in a little bit. he noticed that it had its effects. Why? Because he developed prostate cancer and his wife ovarian cancer. He started saying, how can this be? We're a couple completely healthy. We've never had sicknesses. How can this be?
Of breasts or ovaries?
Yeah, she also had of her breast and of everything. Of everything. She had 5 cancers until she died of a heart attack. So she had breast, ovarian, she had of every kind. But he connected these things, these events, with something traumatic that they lived so they can develop this. So, thanks to that happening to his son, he could begin investigating and discovering these laws. Very well. This conflict is called DHS from now forward, the Dirk Hammer syndrome, and he baptized it with his son's name to give honor to the death of his son, which, thanks to the death of his son, we can enjoy these laws, or the discovery of these laws. Very well. So then what's a DHS? It's a conflict or shock, very acute or dramatic, unexpected, and lived in solitary, that occurs simultaneously in the psyche, the brain, and the organ. Psyche is the psychological part. Brain is the physical part of our brain, and the corresponding organ to what that part of the brain controls. We can understand it in a different form. Our brain is the computer, our personal computer, our PC. And the program, all of Windows, the operating system is a psyche. The psyche is the operating system, and the computer is the brain. So we can understand the difference between the actual physical hardware and the software. Very well. So it's important that the first criteria, every program, every special program with biological sense, I'm going to be calling it SBS, every SBS starts always with a DHS. There's no SBS without a DHS. There isn't. Except in one example that I'll be giving later on. That I'll be giving an SBS that doesn't receive a DHS, so to speak. But every SBS needs, yes or yes, a DHS that gives a start to that special program. And that special program, SBS, occurs always, always, always in 3 levels. This is very important. In the psyche, the brain, and the specific organ. And always according to the color of the conflict that occurs in a specific area of the brain that we're going to be calling it a relay. When a part of the brain is touched, you feel the organ corresponding to the brain. By way of computed tomography, without contrast, we are then able to observe Hammer's focus. We can know what kind of conflict was had and in what organ was affected. Or if I see an affected organ, I can perfectly know where Hammer's focus will come up and what was the emotion they felt. And if I know what emotion was felt, I know perfectly and in what part of the brain Hammer's focus is going to be produced. Hammer's focus are concentric rings, very finite, which are like a drop of water that falls into the water and it expands like this with circles. That is Hammer's focus. Now, what is it that causes the brain to have that? It's a literal hit on the brain. Even if you don't believe it, when we receive a DHS, the brain is hit. Hit how? Electromagnetically. And who hits it? From the studies that have been done. And this advances further than Hammer now. From the studies that have been done, it's hit by the heart. It's the trigger. And this is what I'm trying to say. Hammer didn't discover this. Others discovered it after Hammer. And it turns out that all the emotions, we feel them in the heart. And from the heart, the signal parts immediately, like the shot that comes out. And it's marked on the brain, and from the brain, it's marked on all the organs we've said. The brain, psyche, and organ. Brain, psyche, and organ. But what triggered it all was the heart. Whether you believe it or not, it has some sensors that are connected directly to the brain. The emotion we feel in the heart, and that's all shot out as so. Very interesting. I hadn't said it the other day because I didn't want to confuse anyone. But don't take that into account. I'm telling you where the impulse is born. But it repercussions where? In 3 places. It doesn't repercussion in the heart. The heart is what starts it all. Brain, psyche, and organ. Very well. And like I told you, a hit is formed in the brain. And what causes it to form? Electromagnetism. That's expanding in waves and literally shakes the brain and hurts it. That's why we can see it in a computer tomography, otherwise we wouldn't be able to see
It
it.
leaves a mark.
It leaves a clear mark,
Physically speaking.
physically talking. When we enter the solution phase, which I'm going to talk about, that mark changes from being rings, concentric rings, very defined. They begin to blur. The lines that were very thin from the center, all the thin lines, when we enter the solution phase in the tomography, they show up as thick lines and like blurred, like it's beginning to leave. And when the conflict finishes completely in a satisfactory manner, a scar is left behind in that place. That's why Hammer was able to get any computated tomography without contrast and say, this one's already healed, I see the scar. This one's active and this one's in the process of healing. 3 different forms, 3 different ways. Active with concentric finite lines, when in the healing phase begins to blur, and when it's completely healed, you see a scar. So basically a mark is always left on the brain. Was this understood perfectly? Very well. So then, the second criteria says this. The content or the color. The color is how the person lived the conflict, because the conflict is always neutral. The conflict is always neutral. If they kick us out and they fire all of us from a factory, the conflict is neutral. How each person is going to live it is the color of the conflict. One is going to live loss of territory, a conflict of survival. Another person might live it as an emotional loss of personal evaluation. What's the term? Devaluation. One's going to live it as devaluation. So that's the color of the conflict, how it's lived. The conflict is always neutral. That's why we're always wrong when we put the blame on another person. You're to blame. You did this to me. No, the conflict is neutral. The conflict is neutral. I generate the DH. I generate the SBS. The SBS, I generate it. That's why each person lives it a different way. There's also the person that's fired and it doesn't do anything to him. Why doesn't it do anything to him? Because she doesn't care. I'm going to go look for another job. I don't have a problem. I'm happy. So the conflict is neutral. The color is given to it by every individual. You guys understood all that, right? Very well. So the second criteria says that according to the color of the conflict of the DHS, determines the location of Hammer's focus in the brain and in the organ where the special program is going to be executed, the SBS. In other words, if I see it as territorial, I'm always going to have the conflict in a specific part of the brain and it's going to affect a specific organ. If I live it as a conflict of devaluation, I'm going to be affected in another part of the brain with the corresponding organ that will be affected. Are you understanding? That's a law, always a law. And the third criteria of the first law, if you don't understand all this, rewatch as many times as necessary this video until you understand it, because it's all so new, so crazy, and I'm talking so much bullshit. People could say, right, that it's difficult to understand and chew all this. Watch it until you can understand it. The color of the conflict is how it affects me, the emotion. One DHS is neutral. How I'm going to live it is the color of the conflict. Understand all this, right? And how I live it, according to what I feel, the impact will be in different parts of the brain corresponding to the relay to a specific organ. Always and in every single time. So once you get a handle of all this terminology, you understand perfectly. Hammer's focus indicates to me a specific organ and no other. If Hammer's focus is located above the lungs, the organ that controls the lungs, I'm never going to get bone cancer. Because if the impact was on the lungs, where am I going to have the problem? In the lungs. Because a specific part of the brain controls the lungs. Therefore, I'm going to have a problem exactly there in the lungs. Very well. Today, I'm going to give an example of breast cancer because it's very common. Maybe even those who are listening are suffering from breast cancer. I tell you because all kinds of people write to me. But the important thing is to stop having fear. Even of death, because when it's your time to die, you're going to die. But die with dignity. Not intubated in the hospital and with your kidneys failing because you're in a place outside of your space. If you're going to die, die with dignity. But learn what is an SBS. That is a special program that comes to cure you. Every disease comes to cure us. We don't have to cure the disease. The disease comes to cure us. Because if we had that SBS, it's because we're not perfect. Because if we were perfect, we wouldn't have been affected by anything. And if something's affected, it's because we have to learn to not be affected by it. If someone is fired from their job and is affected in various parts, like loss of territory, loss of self-esteem, devaluation, and also a conflict of starvation because he thinks he's not going to eat, even if it's not the case, but he thinks he won't eat. He has to learn to surpass those three things so the next time it happens, none of the three affect him. So the disease comes to show us in what we are weak. Because someone who's strong, truly strong, not in the sense that we think as strong, but truly strong, what happens is the DHS doesn't affect them. Why strong? Because that isn't his territory. Their territory is themselves, not everything else outside of him. Because his value is right here, not in what the people think of him. And because they're not going to die of hunger because they have enough value to look for another job. So if they were truly strong, nothing will affect them. So those who are affected is to show them their weak point. Their weak spot. Are you understanding all this? So then the disease, exactly how we know it, an SBS, what does it come for?
To heal
To
us.
cure us. Very well.
And if we say cure, it's because it comes from the Latin word for priest. What does a priest do? Do you know why? One of the reasons why people before didn't used to get sick as much, because they used to confess. And if you see the points of the DHS that says lived in solitary, if I go and I make a disaster or I have many things to confess and I go and confess to the priest and I tell the priest and he questions me and on top of that he gives me a job to do to free myself from it, I don't get the DHS. So then that's why the Latin word is cura. Why cura? Because they cure. They cure. The curas cure all the time. The people came out cured from there. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll be cured from the celestial temple. They'd come out cured and they wouldn't get an SBS. That's why when the people began more and more to become atheists, more DHSs of all kinds and more SBS. Because they don't have, who are they going to confess to? Their monkey ancestors? If there's no superior being to confess to, then all the guilt is carried by you alone. And what happens is SBS start popping up of all kinds, of course, and they die faster. So then precisely that is one of the reasons that why they're called curas. And from there comes the word cure, the sickness. Where do you think it comes from? Curing. It's like the priest is coming and is curing us with holy water all the time. That's why. The best word is heal, but we use cure and it's set because they're interchangeable. The cure for this, heal from this. Very well. Now you know why it's called curing. So then, that's the second criteria. The first criteria, quickly, every SBS starts with a DHS. Second criteria, according to the color of the DHS that the individual lives, the location of Hammer's focus and the corresponding organ will be affected. That's the second criteria. The third criteria is that all SBS or special program with a biological sense runs synchronously in the three levels: psyche, brain, and organ. From the DHS to the solution of the conflict. And today we're going to see the second law. So then, we can't just cure only the psyche, because if you just cure the psyche, nothing gets cured.
The organism says, or you cure the three or you don't cure anything.
Just like that, I tell you. Once the SBS develops, the three have to be cured. Because the three initiated and the three finish. Because the psychologists believe that by only curing the psyche, the rest gets cured, and they're wrong. You have to cure all of it. So then it's all synchronous. They start together and they finish together. Was that all clear and understandable? And that's a law. If you don't want to believe it, that's your problem. Absolutely your problem. Very well. Let's go to the law number 2. All that we saw last week, today I just refreshed it so you guys can continue studying. Law number 2. All SBS special program with a biological sense, what we call sickness, all SBS develops in 2 phases as long as a solution to the conflict exists. In other words, I can say this law in a different way. All SBS is biphasic, means that it has 2 phases. Biphasic, when and where there is a solution to the conflict. Because if there's no solution to the conflict, we can't enter the healing stage. We can't see the priest. If we don't resolve the conflict, there can't be the healing stage. It can't exist. First, we have to resolve the conflict. I'll explain it right now. I want you to write another term, because this one's very important, before I begin to draw some things there. The conflictual mass. Conflictual mass. This one's very, very important. Why? Many people die from this. What I'm going to say, many people. Even with the German medicine, they die because of this, because there's no other way to fix it. Conflictual mass is exactly this. It's the degree or the intensity of the DHS that the individual lives. You can see that there's DHSs that are small, and there's DHSs that are huge. It's not the same exactly. It's not the same that they fire you from a job and you didn't win anything compared to suddenly losing a child. It's not the same. The DHS changes completely. It's not the same thing that one day they mug you, a DHS, and the day that they murder your wife or your husband. It's not the same thing. So then the intensity that it's lived with, because they killed someone's wife and he hated her, there is no DHS there. So the intensity of the DHS times the duration of the conflict until the resolution arrives. That is the conflictual mass. This is very important, absolutely, because from this depends if the conflict is huge, and on top of that, the resolution is delayed, very much so, the most probable is that our patient dies. Because the conflict is brutal. And if it isn't resolved quickly, but it takes lots of time to resolve, when the resolution arrives, the resolution is so strong that it kills him. I'll just say that right now. For example, I'll give you an example later on. But understood what is conflictual mass? It's the degree.
With he who receives a DHS?
The degree of the color of the DHS for the individual And what else? The time of duration of the active conflict. We call active conflict the active part of the conflict. I'll explain it right now. Was it understood what conflictual mass is, right?
Yes.
Very well. Very well. Let's start with a graphic. This is the compass of Hammer. That's what he called it, and that's what it is, and it's the compass of all diseases. This is the compass. You draw a line, that's how it is, and it's a compass of as straight as possible. And in the compass of Hammer, we'll start further back. This is our life. Let's say that. The common life of ours.
So then we have the normotonia come and go.
Let's leave it about there. It could be all this. It could be across the entire drawing like this. A come and go that we could put. Let's put it in. What color should we put it? Let's put it in red and blue. We could put this is called normotonia or eutonia, the name that you want, or memorize them both in case you see them. They're both used in Hammer's manuals. Normotonia or eutonia. It's the regular life. This that's in blue signifies day phase. Let's put it so you can understand. This is the part of the day. And this is the part of the night. The day phase and the night phase. I have very nice handwriting, but I don't even understand it. Let's put it a little bit better. Night. The part of the day and the part of the night. The part of the day is also called sympaticatonia. They're terms that you have to learn. Sympaticatonia. 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 All right, where does the accent mark go? Who knows? Because all these translators write so bad. Some even put double accent mark. Just imagine. Sympaticatonia. We're going to put it at the end. Sympaticatonia. It comes from sympathetic. Very sympathetic. Tonia is a tone. But sympathetic, the tone is excitement. The person's excited to do all kinds of things. What is this called? Sympaticatonia. And this part of the night is called vegatonia. And it comes from vagus precisely. The vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the one that reduces lots of activities. It's the one that slows down the heartbeat, the vagus nerve, so that the heart doesn't accelerate. The heart would constantly accelerate, and the vagus nerve will decelerate it and give it rhythm. Now, when it takes control, the vagus nerve, it totally takes out lots of activities that we do. It reduces brain activity. You get sleepy. And you don't want to do anything, and you throw yourself to sleep. You're in vegatonia. We're tired, we want to rest, we don't want to do anything. We're in vegatonia. Or we're in sympaticatonia or vegatonia. This could also be called parasympaticatonia. You'll find them in manuals. I'm telling you, the vegatonia is also medically called parasympaticatonia. Para is precisely opposite of sympaticatonia. Did you understand what I'm saying? I'm not going to write it down because I'm going to call it vegatonia. But you could find in certain manuals, instead of vegatonia, parasympaticatonia. That is sympaticatonia and parasympaticatonia. Very well. Perfect. And this is the normal part of our life. with ups and downs. There's days I don't want to draw it because I'm going to need that. But there's days that we extend sometimes a little because we have an exam or we have to finish a job. We have to complete a specific chore. So we sleep very little and we work like animals, or we study a whole bunch more. So then we enter sympathicatonia many hours, and then we complete the exam, or we deliver our work, or we finish our homework. We feel exhausted, for example, on a weekend, and we sleep 2 days straight. We're dead. We don't want to do anything, but not just for 1 day, 2 or 3 days. And that's when we enter into vegatonia, because everything we did in sympathicatonia, we have to render in vegatonia. Are you understanding the concept?
Reproduce it, repair it in a certain way.
Of course, everything we do in sympathicatonia, we have to repair with vegatonia. We could use the term repair,
Repair it,
or
no.
exactly, there's no problem. Okay, up to now, everything okay?
All good.
Every day we're in sympathicatonia, vegatonia, sympathicatonia, vegatonia, sympathicatonia, vegatonia. That's the normal life until something generates when we least expect it. If we're not ready, what can be produced?
A DHS.
In this moment that we lived so well, life was giving us a great big smile beautifully. I'm going to make a triangle as such. A DHS is produced. Brutal, right here. DHS. In this point exactly, we're doing fine. Well, it could happen at any moment, at night, whatever's the case. This is just an example. A DHS is produced, and when a DHS is produced, we enter in a brutal sympathicatonia. Brutal, total craziness.
We no longer have vegatonia.
We enter in, when we have a DHS, we enter in sympathicatonia permanently, totally permanent. That's very important until we get to the solution of the conflict. Because if not, we could end up dying for lack of vital energy. Like I've said, the cancer doesn't kill anyone, but to fight so much against the cancer and not resolve the problem, or we have various cancers because we generate new DHSs, what that ends up doing is exhausting our vital energy and our bodies disconnect and we end up dying. But it wasn't under any circumstance the cancer in and of itself. It was that our vital energy was exhausted. And precisely in this active part right here, we're using lots of vital energy for that. Very well. So then, there comes a time that we finally resolve the conflict. Let's put another triangle here. We resolve the conflict. And this has a term in the German medicine, a new medicine, CL. CL. And from here on, you have to know what CL is. Just like you know what DHS is, you also have to know what CL is. CL is conflict lysis. Conflict lysis. Lysis is final. What does it mean then? The end of the conflict. There comes a point when the solution to the conflict has arrived. Very well. All this part right here, we're going to put in blue. All this part is going to go in blue. See how I put the phases of the day in blue? All this part, we're going to put all of it in blue. Everything in blue. For what reason? Because we are in active conflict. Another of the things, another term that you have to learn. This doesn't just mean California. California, but conflict active. CA. What does CA mean? Conflict active. So we have various abbreviations that we have to memorize. A DHS, we already know what a DHS is. The initiation of the conflict. All this part until we get to the solution of the conflict lysis is called conflict active. When the CL or the conflict lysis arrives, there is when the conflict is finished. So good so far? Okay. This part of the disease, this part is called the code phase. Code. Let's put it in blue. the code phase of the disease. The code phase. When we're in a conflict active, we get a DHS. Why does the conflict active come? Why can we sleep so little? That is, we go to sleep and we sleep a few hours and we wake up and we're thinking permanently in what's happening. That is a conflict permanently. For what reason? Because the brain leaves us in sympathetic atonia permanently so that our mind can search for a solution to the conflict. Otherwise, we die. Our mind needs the solution to the conflict. It was like what I was explaining last time. If there's a cat behind a rat, the rat receives a DHS, someone wants to eat him, that immediately starts the phase of conflict active. What he least wants is to sleep, and he doesn't want to eat either. When we're in conflict active, we don't want to eat either. That is, we eat very little. We eat very little, and it's the time that the patient begins to sleep little, be very nervous. The stress is through the roof. The stress completely rises. They aren't hungry. They begin to lose weight. Lots of people lose lots of weight in this part of the conflict. They have their hands cold. That's why it's called the cold phase. If you touch their hand, especially this part right here, in the meaty part of the fat finger, the thumb, actually, the thumb. So then, if you want to know if your patient or yourself, after a DHS, how you're doing, simply by touching here, you can notice if it's cold. If it's cold, you're in an active conflict. Not only the hands get cold, the feet as well. That's why it's called the cold phase. So then, now you have these complete characteristics. In the psyche level, for example, in the psyche level, the activity of the conflict or the conflict active is manifested in a constant stress regarding the conflict. We're in complete sympathetic atonia because the autonomous nervous system is the one that enters into sympathetic atonia and it doesn't enter into vagatonia. So then vagatonia becomes null. That stays in an extended period until the solution of the conflict. The common symptoms, I've said and I'll repeat: insomnia, lack of appetite, rapid beating of the heart, high blood pressure, low levels of sugar in the blood, and nausea. Those are what indicate, or they're, we could say, symptoms of the active part of the conflict. Very well. It's the cold phase because the blood vessels contract, what results in the hands and the feet being cold, pale skin. Like a person, you've seen that they receive a big scare and they become pale, right? There's a DHS. When a person crashes or receives a scare or something happens and you see them and they're white as paper, they're precisely in the active phase of the conflict. If you were to touch their hands, they'd be frozen, completely frozen, because the blood vessels contract. That's why blood pressure rises, right? And what else? Okay, what this does is that the body prepares you so that with your mind, you won't rest until you reach the solution of the conflict. This occurs in nature in all the animals when they lose territory or someone wants to devour them. They enter into this phase to be able to defend themselves or to escape. The two options in nature. It's either fight or escape. There's no other option. Very well. What is it that occurs in this phase in the level of the brain? We've already talked about the psyche. What happens to us? In the level of the brain, what happens right here? What happens is that it forms Hammer's focus precisely in this part. It begins to form and delineate clearly the hit in the precise location according to the color that we have lived the DHS. So then in this part is very well outlined. Hammer's focus. Very well. And in the organ, what happens in the organ? Precisely, the organ remains affected immediately. Now, this was challenging for Hammer to understand until he was able to record it in a way that spectacular. And it's a law. We can divide the brain in 4 parts, but for now I'll divide it in 2. To understand this, the old brain and the new brain. The old brain, in this division, we could say, is the brainstem and the cerebellum. It's very important to understand this. I'll repeat, for the conclusion that I'm going to give of the law, Hammer divided it only in 2. Afterwards, he'll divide it in 4, but for now, he divides it in 2. Old brain and new brain. The old brain, we could say, is the reptilian one, and we could specify that it's the brainstem and the cerebellum that fulfill the basic primary functions of survival. And the new brain, that is the cerebral medulla, that is the white material, and the cerebral cortex, that is the gray matter, the entire exterior part, that would be the new brain. Are you understanding? In case you didn't understand, I'll draw it right here because I could end up losing you guys after I can immediately erase it. Okay, right here we have the brain of a person. We'll draw it so-so. The brain of a person. This is the brainstem. I'll draw it in another color. I'll color it in a different color. The brainstem and the brainstem and the cerebellum. The old part. All this is the old part. And the part of the medulla and the cortex, we'll put it in a different color, green. The part of the medulla right here and the entire cortex is the new part. And why is this important? It's extremely important because all the organs controlled by the old brain or the old part of the brain will grow in the active part of the conflict. They'll grow. All of them will grow. In other words, all the organs that are controlled by the brainstem and the cerebellum, what will happen? They'll grow. So then are born those that are called malignant right here. Precisely in this part right here. Malignant tumors that begin to grow terribly. I've already talked to you about lung cancer. When I fear death, it begins to precisely develop lung cancer, to expand itself, to supposedly take in more oxygen. But that starts off immediately after the DHS. It happens immediately after the DHS. Now, you'll understand that very well. I'll explain that well. You'll understand it in breast cancer. The 2 kinds of breast cancers that I'll explain. But I want you to understand something. The old part grows in the active part. The organs that are controlled by the new part of the brain shrink, they ulcerate, or they stop working. The bones decalcify in this part. The arteries ulcerate. In the stomach, ulcers appear. In the ducts appear ulcers. In the pancreas, it could stop working or function in a different form. Are you understanding? But they never grow. But they'll grow in the solution of the conflict. That is, the organs that are controlled by the old part of the brain grow in the active phase, and then they're destroyed. The organs that are controlled by the new part of the brain, they ulcer or they function improperly, supposedly. They function in a different form, in the active part, but in the part of the solution of the conflict, they begin to grow to repair. They grow to repair the operations and the loss of calcium, and or they begin to function perfectly in what previously didn't work. This was a challenge for Hammer to understand because he couldn't understand why some organs had the effect of growing
And shrink.
and shrink as well in the same phase. So then he discovered that depending on the part of the brain that controls the organ, it'll grow, it'll shrink, or it'll stop functioning correctly. Has this been clearly understood? Later I'll explain this. So then I'll erase this. The brain has another division, the new old new part, and the new part, but I'll explain that later. When we get to the third law, we're in the second law. That it interests me that you understand really what is the second law. So then, at the organ level, depending who controls that organ, so then in the active part, it'll grow,
Or it's gonna shrink
or it'll shrink, or it'll function improperly. To say it like that
depends on what.
depends on who controls it.
Yeah.
Depends on who controls it. Very well. Exactly. Depends on who controls it. Very well. We'll have an example to give you here. For example, it says that if in nature a female has a sexual conflict of not being able to mate, the tissue covering the cervix, that's the passageway to the uterus, ulcers, because the female is incapable of mating or have sex to have children. So then, what happens? The cervix ulcers. The biological meaning of the loss of tissue is to widen the cervix in a manner so that when mating, even though it has la in the Spanish word, the biological mating, so then when mating finally happens, more sperm can reach the uterus. That is, instead of having it very closed, it ulcers so it can widen so that more sperm can reach the uterus, which in turn increases the probability of conception. For female humans, this conflict of mating can be experienced as sexual repulsion, frustration, and so on. That is, that if a woman receives a sexual repulsion, be that what it may be, and she feels frustrated, biology will take control there immediately, and it'll generate first the ulceration of the cervix, and afterwards cancer of the cervix, just like that. Because she felt rejected. So her biology says, no, now we're more prepared. Let's see if they receive us this time. But because there's no solution of the conflict, it doesn't just stay with the ulcerations, next comes the cancer. That's so it could be understood. There are programs that, whether you like it or not, you can't stop him.
Exactly.
What you can do is avoid it by becoming aware of what you're feeling so that it doesn't print the special program, because once it starts, only thing you can do is detain it, stop the active phase as fast as possible, because it happens to all of us. To all of us it happens. But when we become aware that something shot itself in our body, what is it that we have to do first? Solve the conflict so it won't become as big.
The effect.
The mass, how is it that I said it was called, that I defined it? The conflictual mass. It's very important to stop the program quickly so that the conflictual mass isn't as big, because if it's very large, it can kill us. So then, and if the conflict is triggered, let's stop it, because the faster we stop it, the solution that I'll explain right now is much easier and faster. But if we let it continue, when we do want to solve it, the solution is much longer as well. It's one thing to stop a cancer of 2 or 3 millimeters in the chest than to stop a cancer of 10 inches squared in a big ball like this in the chest. It's different, stopping it on time, because it'll heal that ball as such. But what it's going to cost you is precisely what you didn't pay before. Are you understanding? Sometimes we hear, after a long fight against cancer, the brave gladiator or fighter lost the battle and died. but he fought against the cancer. Have you heard all that?
Yeah.
To cancer, you have to fight against cancer with all your strength. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
Okay, the more you fight against cancer, the faster you die. Because cancer is your friend, not your enemy. The cancer shouldn't be removed, eliminated, or killed. Because if you kill it, you die.
Yeah. Well, it grows more.
Exactly. If the cancer were to be victorious, in truth, the person would be alive. That's why I said I was going to talk about all kinds of idiocy, so you understand. With never fight against cancer. Because if you fight against cancer, you fight against life itself.
You can find
Never
out.
lose.
Exactly. So then if you have a cancer yourself, then prepare yourself for a path that life wants to show you to solve your problems. The cancer came to help, so it won't happen again. Cure that, and it won't happen again. Heal that, but healing is living the process, and the cancer will teach you all that is wrong in your life. For something, for a reason, the cancer came. What did the cancer come for? To help you. What did the cancer come for? So you can be a better person. If the cancer didn't come, you would have never changed. But don't fight the cancer because it'd be fighting your savior. It's like that, fighting the savior. The comment should have been, they fought against the poor cancer until finally they killed it. That's how the comment should have been. Instead of the guy fought against cancer. No, poor cancer. They gave him poison. They
intoxicated him.
irradiated it. They intoxicated it. They cut it until the poor cancer died. That's how the comment should have been. But you see that they always say, after a long fight against the cancer, all the time, they bombard us right here, a long fight against the cancer.
Irony.
Irony, exactly. Very well. So then we return to the part that we are missing on this compass. I have to get closer here. Exactly. All of a sudden comes, what does CL mean?
Concrete law.
Lots of answers.
Lysis.
Conflict what? Lysis. Conflict lysis. Conflict lysis is the solution of the conflict. And right here, Hammer discovered something absolutely marvelous. When we resolve a conflict, be it what it may be, it comes to the solution of the conflict. It produces what is the solution, but the solution is difficult, very difficult if we don't understand it. The solution of the conflict comes in two phases. Let's draw it as fast as possible. This is an arrow right here. It comes in two phases always. That's why this is the biphasic law of all sicknesses. Write down everything I give you if you truly want to learn new medicine. If not, you won't learn it. Learn all the terminology that I say. They're simple, it's easy. There's nothing complicated. And if it is complicated, review it and review it until you learn it. Very well, all this part right here is blue. This is the red part that you have here. This is the red part. This is called PCLA. PCLA. And this is PCLB. Very well. What else am I going to put here? Okay, I think it's all well here. Okay, right here is sympathicatonia permanently. Here will enter vegatonia permanently. Like night, we can say. Like a regular night when we're here in normatonia. Will enter completely. It'll change in its totality our life. Here, very well. CE. Write down what CE means. It's crisis epileptoid. Crisis epileptoid. I'm going to explain what it is. You just write. Crisis epileptoid. This is PCLA and PCLB. It means post, you know what post is, right? Afterwards, post conflict lysis A. And this is post conflict lysis B. Conflict lysis is only a point, a conclusion, but that's where it finished. That's where the conflict ended. It doesn't extend anymore. All this part is called the post conflict lysis. What happens after the conclusion of the conflict? The solution phase, we could call it. This is the conflict active solution phase. Very well. All this is the SBS complete from start of the DHS to where it finishes and it normalizes. Let's put it right here that it normalizes afterwards. Life continues normally. And this is the end of the conflict lysis, but we enter in the terrible part of the solution of the conflict. Precisely that's where it hurts the most, where we have the most problem, where all the microorganisms, fungus, and bacteria to help. And that's where we mistake it with all kinds of infection, kill everything. We have to eliminate everything. And that's where the people die brutally because they don't know that they're in the solution of the conflict. It's just that the solution of the conflict is very violent. So violent that it can kill you if you don't know how to manage it. Okay, did I lose anyone or is everyone right here? What does CE mean? Epileptoid.
Epileptoid.
Crisis, it's like a crisis of epilepsy. It's a crisis of epilepsy. Crisis epileptoid. Everyone. Depends on the conflictual mass. How intense the crisis epileptoid will be. But we're all going to have it. Now I'll explain what it works for, this part. Okay. The part of the solution, in the solution phase, that's why it's called the biphasic law. We've seen the active phase in the solution phase. Let's suppose that a person lost his job. So then they felt devalued. And they began to decalcify, or a fast example, they began to decalcify. 2 months later, they find a job equal or better than the other. There, the conflict ends. There they feel calm, there they feel good. And what did they enter? There came the conflict lysis. It finished, and it begins the curing phase. There, suddenly, from nothing hurting them, their bones begin to hurt in a way that they can't believe. If they go to the doctor, something that you guys have to do, if they go to the doctor, they're going to say you have cancer or leukemia or whatever barbarity, depending on the conflict. No, osteoporosis occurs in the code part, but precisely when they lost calcium, it's the code part. It's just that osteoporosis, it doesn't hurt when you're losing. But when it begins to recover, that's where it hurts, like, because they need some special bacteria to inject the calcium again. And it's the luxury group of the body. That means that if they decalcify, when it does calcify, it'll calcify much stronger. So then the bone swells. And it swells, and the part of the skin that surrounds the bone is what hurts. That begins to stretch. When it decalcifies, it doesn't hurt for anything. The only way you can tell that you're getting decalcified is that they give you an analysis or that you break a bone. But hurt, it doesn't hurt at all. You don't even notice. You're losing calcium and you don't even notice. But when the healing phase comes, it hurts that you can't even move. You can't move. If you ingest things for the pain, you stop the calcification stops working. You interrupt the process. What does medicine do immediately?
Stop
They
it.
give you something for pain. If you take something for pain, what you do is interrupt the healing phase. So it takes away your pain. You feel good. The bones don't recalcify. When the pill wears out, the body initiates, but much stronger still, because it says, what happened? You interrupted me? Here comes loads more trucks of calcium, and we have to swell more, and you get a pain, and you take more pills, and that's how people begin to take more pills. And they go to the doctor and say, give me something stronger because this doesn't have any effect on me. And then the only thing you do is destroy yourself, because we have to learn now to endure the pain, like it or not. Because who caused us to get sick? Yourselves. Now you have to learn to control the pain. If you want the little pill to take out the pain, then there's no healing. That's the truth. Um, it's very criticized, this medicine, because the people don't want pain.
Yeah, they hate the pain.
So then take all kinds of painkillers, and that's it. What's the problem? You don't want it to hurt? Take painkillers and fix it yourself. You won't fix. What's more, you will detain, and you'll get to a point that you enter a new conflict. Because the body says, you don't let me fix this, a new conflict initiates. And so, if a new conflict initiates permanently, that's when the chronic diseases begin. So then the only thing that you're taking is pills because the doctor says you'll never be cured. Why won't you ever be cured? Because you enter the healing phase and I give it pills. So then the body detains itself. It gives me a new DHS. It hurts and it enters again the healing phase. And that's how we have the rheumatoid arthritis. The people can't cure because the only thing they want is all kinds of drugs. And all the chronic diseases is because they interrupt this permanently. And there's another factor that, let's see if I don't forget to tell you, the relays that cause that even if you want to cure yourself, you can't heal because a relay awakens again. I'll explain it now. And you can have more than one relay. I'll explain it right now. I'll explain it. Don't worry, but I've now told you the term. You can go writing it down. What are relays? Relays. Very well. So then, conflict lysis, end of the conflict, a new phase is initiated. The second phase, the most terrible of them all. If you thought this was terrible, no, this one's terrible. That you have to know to endure it, that you have to know how to guide it. And someone that knows about German medicine, when in front of someone that has a medical prognostic or a medical diagnosis, they can know perfectly in what stage they are of the sickness. That's where the wisdom is. If you're in conflict active, or if you're in conflict, if you're in the resolution of the conflict, and in what part they're at, because it's very important. Absolutely important in what part they're at. If they're in part A, or if you're already in part B. If medicine gets you on part B, that you're about to be cured, is when it kills you. It kills you, absolutely, just like that. It kills you because they misinterpret. It's not that they do it on purpose, the medics. The system is bad, but the medics don't know. The medics see a diagnosis, say, oh, here they're growing a mass of something. We have to take it out. Precisely that's when you were healing completely, and there they killed you. And there they produced other DHSs, and they finished fucking you. And that's how everyone dies. So then, this medicine is marvelous because it helps you determine the advance of how you are in the special program with a biological sense. Are you understanding? Very well. So we're in the second part. In the part of post-conflict lysis A, that part is the part that's called exudative. I'll put it here. This is the exudative part. Exudative. If it's misspelled or if it's not misspelled, don't criticize. Exudative. Write it how you can. Exudative. In this part, it's what happens is I'm talking to you without a guide. I put 1, 2 little drawings. That's it. This part is where all the diseases ending in itis, bronchitis, arthritis, tonsillitis, everything ending in itis are in this part of the solution of the conflict. It's where everything swells. That's why it's exudative. Where mucus is produced, boogers are produced, all kinds of liquids are produced, edemas are produced. All of a sudden, the muscle was good, everything all good. All of a sudden, you have an edema like this. This is the part precisely where the bronchioles hydrate and you can't breathe. They're until they die. But why? Because the mucus that they have. Because they're in the part of the solution of the conflict, but in the exudative part. And well, bronchitis is something chronic because since you can't stop it, but I'll explain it right now. That's anger, no? You have anger against something, that's bronchitis. That's where the term bronchioles. Everything that gets you angry goes to the bronchitis, and you get a terrible bronchitis. So then everything gets you angry. Everything gets you angry. You have bronchitis. Okay, that doesn't matter. Excluding that. Exudative is what it means is that all the organs begin to exude, expand, and mucus, you have mucus or water, the edemas. All that happens here in this point of the disease. And this is the hot part. Don't forget, this is the hot part. This is the cold part. This is the hot part. Hot from the disease. Did you know that the traditional medicine, that is where you have to go if something happens to you? The traditional medicine has, give or take, 500 diseases. They're divided in cold or hot, but they have not the slightest idea of why. They don't understand anything. They don't even understand the relation of cold and hot. Because there's some sicknesses that give you fever and others that you're extremely cold. Like this, you realize? So then they don't even understand why. Okay, you guys know now. The cold diseases go in the conflict active. The hot diseases, when you have an infection, you already know you're in the solution. That you already know. You have fever, you're not here. You have fever, you're right here. All the fevers, all the infections, all the infectious diseases. When the symptom arrives, you're already in the solution phase. Everyone, solution phase. We're so afraid of fevers that in just like 40, like, let's see, 30, in 40, we already have a terrible fear. Yes or no? It already seems that we're going to lose. Well, there's people that in reality lose some notion of what's happening and they could rave. But normally, a person can withstand calmly 40 degrees without worrying. Without worry. Now, no questions. The only thing they have to do is maintain the head code. That helps out a lot because the danger of the fever is in the brain, nothing else. So then the only thing you need to help the patient out with is maintain their head code. But 40 degrees of fever is fine. That translated into Fahrenheit is 104. 104, no problem. Don't cause any problems. 104. From 105 and higher, that's when you should fret. But 104, no. And the brain handles the disease very well. Handles it very well. It's just that we don't know how to handle it well. That's what happens. That's so you don't get worried. Because right here at 102 and the people are dying, that my son is going to become dumb, or that he's going to rave and his brain will fry and blah, blah, blah. No. The fever is a natural process of the body in which it allows a rapid development, a bunch of bacteria, against what the medicine says. That heat is necessary to develop bacteria to help you guys. And when they're not necessary anymore, the temperature rises to the maximum to eliminate the bacteria. But first, it raises it a little so they can develop. And afterwards, when they finish their job, it raises it more to eliminate them. Very well, but that'd be a different study, and I don't want to complicate things. I told you I was going to make it as simple as possible. Okay, so then, this is the hot phase of the disease. If before, we're worried, tense, we couldn't sleep, now we enter vegatonia completely. All this is vegatonia permanent. The only thing we want to do is sleep in the night and in the morning. Even though males, they wake up about 5 or 6 in the morning to go pee or the bathroom. But that's a natural process of going to see if there aren't any. It's a program that we still have, that there aren't any enemies in the territory, and it's all good. If it's all good,
if it's all good, and in the process we mark our territory. But we wake up, give or take, around that time, even though we can continue sleeping. But by that time we wake up to see if it's all good or that there aren't any other alpha male roaming around. That's how it is. That's how it is. If the male is right-handed, because if the male is left-handed, they don't have that problem. But if the woman's left-handed, the left-handed women do have that problem. Well, but I'm not going to talk about left-handed women or men. Okay.
Never mind.
Never mind. What I want to explain is, if in the active phase we couldn't sleep here, we sleep all the time. What's more, we annoy our families. And why are you sleeping so much? Let them be. They're in a special phase. We don't worry about anything. We're relaxed because we've entered a peace. But the problem comes when we begin to feel the symptoms. Because first comes a relief. I've found my job. I've done this. I finally got married. And now I have sexual relations. Whatever. Yeah, because it could be whatever. Because if the guy, alpha male, is desperate for sexual relations or whatever, or doesn't know what to do, when he can do something and says, how great. And that's when all the problems come. All the problems arrive because they come to repair what you previously did, to repair. So then, we enter the hot phase, all kinds of pain arrive, fevers, swelling, mucus, and edemas. The most problematic of all edemas that can cause death is the edema of Hammer's focus. Hammer said, no infection can kill you. Because you've seen that there's infections that have killed millions of people. Here comes an infectious disease. Hammer said none of them can kill you. They don't kill you. What kills you is Hammer's focus, the edema of Hammer's focus. So then, if your conflictual mass, what's conflictual mass?
The time that
The intent.
The intensity of the DHS times the duration until conflict lysis. That is, if the time from the DHS to the conflict lysis is very long and the intensity is enormous, then you have a Hammer's focus like this in the brain. When the resolution to the conflict arrives, you're going to have an edema like this in the brain, and it can kill you. It can cause you to lose consciousness, you can rave, you can become unconscious, it can even kill you. Because everything is proportional to what we have, the damage that we caused ourselves. Because if we would have solved this conflict quickly, the conflictual mass is much smaller. You understand, right? You can't get mad at biology. Neither can you get mad because you didn't know this. Because to say, if I had known this, I would have resolved this before. Well, that's how life is. Be grateful that you're starting to know it now. Yes, because maybe you wouldn't have known it ever. And everyone that died before never knew it. So then, don't start fighting with the laws. The laws are like that. At least learn something. When you have a conflict, what do you have to do?
Resolve it.
As soon as possible. Get to the conflict lysis as soon as possible. So then, when we're in Vegetonia, and I want to write it for you because you guys are somewhat lazy to write and you won't understand. All this part right here, the hot phase, that's the phase of the solution. Like I put here Sympathicatonia and Vegetonia. Here I'm going to put Vegetonia as well. In red, Vegetonia. Vegetonia permanently. Vegetonia all the time. We don't want to work. If we go to work, we get tired quickly. We want to eat. On the contrary, here we lost our appetite. Here we want to eat everything. In this part of look what I'm going to tell you something, okay? Contrary to some things we taught in 2012, Hammer said, if in this part you're resolving a cancer, and the cancer has to decompose, if you do juice fastings, he said it at that time, juice fastings, or just vegetables, what you're doing is preparing yourself to die. In this part, when we're resolving cancer and whatnot, what you have to eat is meat. Just like how you heard it, meat. Because the body needs the best protein, not some vegetable protein that needs to be processed by so many things. And if you who are hearing me are a vegan, I'm sorry, but do whatever you want. Absolutely what you want to do, I'm not interested. I've already told you, I'm crazy, go see a doctor. But if someone wants to learn this, in this part, when there's a resolution to a conflict and you have to resolve a problem, what you have to do is eat, what did I say? Meat. Eat vegetables, juices, it's all good. But eat lots of meat because your body needs it to repair. to repair, because the brutal loss of cells that you're eliminating, you have to repair them with protein. You need protein. If you give it soy protein, it's a bad protein. You need to give it good protein. That's called red meat. Chicken, fish, or all combined. Eggs, cheese doesn't work. I'll say it from now. Neither milk. It doesn't work. I said meat. Very well. It's important because we might say we're going to cure all this cancer with a little green juice. No, right here you die because right here you need a green juice. When you're in sympathetic atonia, drink as much green juice as you can get your hands on, because that will precisely help you calm down. But in this part, you have to eat lots of protein, as well as drinking a green juice. Hammer isn't against that. What he's against is you not giving your body sufficient protein at that moment. Okay, was this understood? Okay, very well. So then, in the healing phase, what happens in the psyche? I've already explained it, but I'm going to read it, what I have written down. The solution to the conflict comes with a sensation of great relief. The autonomous nervous system changes instantly. Here in conflict lysis, instantly changes from sympathetic atonia to a permanent vegatonia, with fatigue, but with a great appetite. Okay. The curing phase, the healing phase, the hot phase, sorry. The hot phase, because your hands that work cold are now hot. You feel them and they're hot. The feet are now hot. The cold phase already passed. A good therapist, the first thing they do, they extend their hand to the patient. A therapist of the new German medicine, not some therapist where you have to go to the doctor, but a therapist that knows new German medicine. The first thing they'll do when you come with a problem, they'll touch your hand. And he knows if you're in what phase you're at just by touching your hand. You guys already know now. A therapist touches your hand and they touch this part right here, because the hand can be cold because of the cold ambient temperature, but this part is always warmer. But if it's cold, he already knows that you're in what stage are you?
Conflict active.
In the conflict active. And if the therapist is good, he'll take you out of the first appointment with your hands hot. If they're good. If they're not good, like there could be many therapists, there could be many coaches. If they're not good,
It will get
they'll-
cold.
you'll come out freezing and with more conflicts. When some guy arrives to the doctor and they're freezing, the doctor says, they're in a brutal active conflict. The doctor says, well, here I just received the exams. Remember I told you that you had prostate cancer? Well, now you have it in the lungs as well. How's the poor patient gonna come out?
Cold.
Freezing! He's gonna come out a frozen little cube. That's why in every hospital there should be a poster that reads, this establishment produces multiple cancers and brings you to the final rest. Do you want to sleep permanently? Enter this establishment. That's how it is, the reality. So then a therapist that knows new medicine takes out their patient and he touches them during the final goodbye. They have it warm because the first thing they told him, they told you that you had cancer? Don't worry. Here, if you want to resolve the conflict, you'll resolve the conflict today. And he begins to talk and he begins to explain why it arrives. The person relaxes and he tells him, and the entire world of the regular medicine, there's no hope whatsoever. But the guy says, don't worry. You know how many I've cured of this? Even though it's a lie, it doesn't matter. He has to work on the psyche urgently. I just worked on 3 patients like yourself, and all worse than you, and they're all alive and at the beach in Cancun right now, and another 2 Acapulco.
How everything changes.
Even if the therapist lies, it doesn't matter.
The psyche
The
cures.
psyche of the guy changes because he sees hope. Because everywhere else, they told him cancer, death. You're screwed. Go looking, open a place where they're gonna put your bones or your dust when we cremate you, and that's it. But if the guy says, don't worry, Do you know how many people I helped cure just like you? And when he receives that hope, he changes completely. Just like that, immediately changes. And if he helps him resolve the conflict, even better.
Yeah, even more.
Even better. The problem is that sometimes a therapist that specializes in New German medicine receive a patient after traditional medicine treated them and they already come much weaker that sometimes you just can't save them because they arrive with chemotherapy that didn't work, with radiation that didn't work, that they took out some part and that didn't work, and they gave them a bunch of antibiotics and some other drugs. They arrive with various problems at a time that have nothing to do, but they produce them over there and the person arrives very weak. That's what you wanted to say?
He comes dead.
Did you say something?
Oh, you're talking about the placebo. It's pronounced placebo?
Of course. The placebo? No, it wouldn't be a placebo, this. It could be no, because I want to give them hope. Placebo is this is gonna cure you here, and it cures and that works.
Something physical.
Something physical. And there's the nocebo effect. You know it, right? The placebo is that if you believe it cures you, and the nocebo are all the medics. When they read, it's true. They read a diagnosis, that's a nocebo effect. Totally noxious. They didn't have anything and you come out with everything.
With everything.
Exactly. You didn't take anything. You didn't have anything. And you came out with cancer all over because it gave you a terror, a brutal terror. And on top of that, we see them with white coats, with their stethoscopes right here, and with as if they know everything. And the nurse comes along and says, "Doctor, doctor." And they have an aura of Elohim, doctor. Well, so then, yeah, and yeah, here's the proof that you got a tumor, a malignant one. There, that's it. Forget about it. And doctor, how do you treat this? Well, we have to try to chemotherapy, radiation. What's the percentage? Well, the life expectancy is 6 months to 9. They're just forget. You know how many DHS you came out of there with? That's why the doctors have that effect called nocebo. On top of them not knowing anything, they're nocebos to their core.
Yes, because everything they say, you believe it.
Everything they believe. Look, if I were to go to a doctor, I'd believe it as well. because you're there and they tell you one thing that they begin with luck. You have just one blood cell and you believe it. You believe it and that's it.
How'd you get here? It's the reality that they say that they're killers.
They kill you completely. They kill you completely. Very well.
Physiologically speaking, in that context?
It's not psychologically because it's biological. If they tell you something and you believe it, it produces DHS at the level of the psyche, brain, and organ. And you're screwed. If it were psychological, it wouldn't be a problem. It's organic, the damage that they do. Organic.
Isn't it the negative part of the neurolinguistics?
Well,
Applied incorrectly.
I don't do neurolinguistics because it doesn't interest me. But they, without doing neurolinguistics, they simply tell you you're gonna die, and their neurolinguistics isn't
They don't
even
need to.
necessary. They don't even need it.
The word.
The word, of course that neurolinguistics has its negative side if they want to use it incorrectly. Like the Bible has its negative side if you want to misuse it.
Exactly. The best thing is not to do an analysis.
Sometimes you need the analysis so that, like it is with, there's a grave problem. The German medicine, they don't allow you to officially practice it. So then, since they don't let you officially practice it, you go see a charlatan. Just like me, a charlatan. Complete charlatan. So then, if Agustin were to come saying, "I have a problem, what's your problem?" And I don't know. We need a diagnosis to know how to treat that problem. Hammer, that was a doctor, gave you the diagnosis. He'd take a tomography, but when you go sit in front of a charlatan, we try to, as give or take, if you tell me the emotion, we imagine and maybe we get it on point. But if you had a diagnosis, I have a cancer of 3 centimeters in my left breast, that's where things change.
Yeah, it's much more
With that, it's very effective. But if they say, it hurts right here, touch me, what do I have here? And we don't know what they have there. If it's a cancer of the mammary gland or of the vessels, and we have to know. So then the diagnoses are good because if these sorcerers would have permitted that hammer develop this marvelous medicine in all the areas, I wouldn't want to know in what level they'd be because they didn't let him investigate anymore. There's so many things that were left somewhat in the air because they cut all the means. So then, of course, in one form or another, it's a necessity to know what the person has.
They can't see anything.
Exactly, but they have their risks as well. Agustin is right. Not just because something hurts, you have to go to the doctor to know what it is. Already, more or less, if you know the area, you don't have to worry, nor do you need a doctor to tell you what you have. There's a conflict that you already know and try to resolve it. When you already know the points, more or less, you no longer need a conflict. So then there's the other part that if we're susceptible with the diagnosis, don't even go because
Yeah, they kill him. They kill him right there.
maybe even that know all this. Well, Mark Fritchett, that I'm going to talk about him, was a doctor that worked with Hammer. And the guy knew and completely and did a complete study of the German medicine. When he had a problem, he got scared and he went to the medicine that he himself practiced and they made him. Well, there's a controversy because Mark Fritchett died at the age of 50. And apparently, it seems that they gave him, against his will, morphine. And with the morphine, they took away his pain, but they also took away the capability to think. And with that, they killed him. Because they killed him there at the hospital, they killed him. Hammer said that he is the first, what do you call, martyr of the new German medicine. Later, I'll tell you the story of Mark Fritchett and the contributions of Mark Fritchett that are marvelous, what the guy contributed. But they killed him right there in the hospital. They killed him. It didn't remain clear how they killed the guy. But, well, the worst thing is that they killed him at a level where the doctor that they themselves were against, you understand? It's like if Hammer were, at the end of his life, were to go to be hospitalized in a clinic for cancer. It's the same. It's the same. Okay, very well. So then, what do I want to say with this? That yes, truly, like Agustin said, sometimes, and to many people, to not even go get a diagnosis. Because on top of that, you go get the diagnosis, and then those guys bar you with cause. You have this much time left. You have to think of what's more convenient for you. Because afterwards, they even call your house that you have to do this. Oh no, don't even want to know what happens. Okay, very well. So then, we are in the level, we're in the psyche level. You get lots of appetite, feel really hungry, but your organ begins to get hot and possibly fever. What happens on the brain's level? I said it and now repeat it. What happens? I'm on this phase, okay? I'm in the phase post-conflict lysis A, TCLA. The exudative phase, where everything swells, where mucus comes out of everywhere, where edemas occur all over. Okay? Very well. What happens with Hammer's focus? Edema is what happens. So then something special happens. You can get lots of fever because where Hammer's focus was located, that bullseye fills up with water because the repairing begins. It fills with water. So then there's a pressure on the brain. It can cause lots of pain on the head. It can cause lots of fever up to the point where you could lose reasoning and consciousness for a time. Just like that because it's pressing on the brain. When I tell you that the diseases and the emotions, when they metabolize in the body, as if it was a blow with a hammer, in the brain, there's a part that fills with water. If that's when the medicine sees you, you precisely go for that headache and they do a tomography or something. They see an edema like that and they say, ooh, the next thing you're getting is a cancer. Not cancer. They tell you, you have, no. The name escapes me. I'll tell you right now. Okay. But what they want to do is open you up, probably, right then and there, to take out that edema. But they don't know that, no, they don't know that what they're going to do is provoke your death. Right there, your death. It's what they call the cerebral tumor. Cerebral tumor. And the people Lots of kids that had conflicts with their parents or whoever, all of a sudden they have headaches when they resolve the conflict. And they go and I'll give you clear examples. Real cases. A child is raped. The family, whatever, they rape him. When he recovers a little bit, more or less, his self-esteem, the solution to the conflict comes. In that moment, the raping that goes to a specific organ of devaluation in the brain, it begins to swell. And depending on how the violation was lived, quite grave. So then some headaches come to his brain. He has fever. They take him to the doctor. They want to check what he has. They look at him, say, your child has a cerebral tumor. If they touch him, they kill him. If they touch him, they'll kill him. Okay, but it got out of topic. The topic is that in the PCLA, everything edematizes or gets edemas. But Hammer's focus is primarily the one that's going to fill up with water. When you already passed that phase, that we should all pass it, except that the conflictual mass be very big. When you already pass that mass, then the body will do some spasms and a tremendous reaction to expel the edema. Imagine that here there is no muscle, but the body's going to do something very special to expel the edema. And it's when this comes right here. The crisis epileptoid. When this entire phase is complete, when the organism and the brain see that they repaired with the edema everything that they wanted to repair, then you have to expel that liquid. And that's when it's produced, always. Sometimes we don't even notice. Sometimes it's a small headache, big, and afterwards, the flu, for example. You see, first, oh, my head hurts. I already know what's going to happen the next thing, and I'm going to catch a cold. Do you notice that? Okay, that was a crisis epileptoid, the headache. It's a very small edema of a very small problem, but the headache comes before the part of the exudative part. Or the headache comes during that part that's the middle, depending on what you're living, and you notice that you eliminated the problem from the brain. From the brain gets eliminated. And I'm talking about little things. With a greater conflict, you feel much more. Okay, so then, the crisis epileptoid is going to be the part that the body does everything possible and necessary to eliminate the edema of Hammer. If it cannot eliminate it, it'll take a pause, and it's going to retry to expel that because it needs to expel it, that edema. What happens there? That's when the heart attacks occur. That's when epilepsies, real ones, occur. That's when other things that I'll tell you afterwards what happens there. That happens to all of you. Or perhaps the majority. That's when you'll understand what's a epileptoid crisis. But afterwards, I'll explain it later. So then, there's where it occurs. The brain really has to do to expel that water that it has edematized in the brain. And it's going to do whatever to expel it. And it resembles epilepsy. Even if you've never had epilepsy, it resembles epilepsy because it's a similar attack. Sometimes you don't even notice. It can last 10 seconds. It can last 20 seconds. It can last 2 minutes because it's a crisis, a return to the conflict. Because you see how it passes. All of a sudden, we're in vegatonia and we rise to a brutal sympathicatonia. We rise to the most acute part of the conflict. That's why I put it in a different color. Do you notice? When we enter into vegatonia, but when the first phase is completed, that's the PCLA. And this part comes to remove the edema from the brain. We enter into a brutal sympathicatonia because it's brutal. It's a brutal peak that once it finishes, we resolved all the conflict. If we pass that stage, the definitive solution to the conflict arrives. If it is that we don't repeat it, if not the rails, and if not, another factor remains. So then, when the expulsion of that arrives, we enter, if we pass it good, if we had a good time, we enter into the phase PCLB. That's the phase post-conflict lysis B.
It's the final part. It's where there's pain, but less. The greatest pain is produced here. When we pass the epileptoid crisis of all diseases, all sicknesses, we enter into what is called, I'm going to write it there. If I find right here my page, okay, it's what's called the cicatrization phase. Cicatrization phase. Okay. Cicatrization. Cicatrization. What happens? You probably already know. If here's where the edema of hammer was formed, here the water was expelled, here's where it cicatrized and it leaves a scar. You saw we passed from defined rings to rings with water, in this part, rings as such that look really weird, to the cicatrization. The same occurs in the organs. If it's the old brain, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen if it's an organ controlled by the old brain in the active phase?
It's gonna grow.
It'll swell, it'll grow, the organ. What happens then? When we enter into vegetonia, to the solution to the conflict, what's going to happen? It's going to begin to decompose. Who decomposes it? The tuberculosis, other microbacteria, and different funguses, depending the organ. Today I'm not going to explain it. But when it expels this is when it finishes closing all the wounds and it finishes the process. And arriving here as if nothing had happened to us. Scars remain. It's as if you got cut and then it's scarred. But normally you're left as if nothing has occurred. And you overcame many things. Because this came to show you if you became aware, right? If a doctor didn't cure you cutting something out. If here's where you became aware of what a badly handled emotion produces and the entire system, the next time that it happens to you, you'll handle it differently, right? You're going to begin to handle it differently. The emotion, so that the same thing doesn't happen to you because it comes to teach you. All this process, with the pain included, that's necessary, it comes to teach you.
Your attitude is critical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To healing, it's critical. If you don't know this process, and if it's a huge SBS, not just some code, if it's a pronounced SBS, then or you'll never learn and you'll continue to repeat it constantly, or you die because you didn't know how to handle it, or no one told you how to handle it, or the doctors and encounters handled it for you, or you learn from your own body, you learn all this new medicine, and already that conflict won't happen again. You're understanding, right?
Same thing when someone loses their son and the mother loses her son.
Exactly the same. They're gonna pass through a conflict like this. Okay, this would be up to here, and afterwards comes a normatonia or eutonia, like it was before here. Did you understand the process? There's many more things that I can add, but the basic is that you understand the process of all diseases. Now, I told you that these sicknesses can be produced or it can turn chronic. In the moment that I take a drug, I'm already announcing that I want it chronic, the disease. And this part is where the diseases that end in itis are. And here they end in osis, like osteoarthritis, and all those that end in. It's that part of the disease. An example, so you can get an idea. This is in this part is where the itis, and here's the osis in this part. An experienced charlatan in New German medicine knows perfectly in what stage exactly you're at to help you pass the crisis epileptoid. If he knows and he helps you pass the crisis epileptoid in a good form, then truly you have ensured the curation.
For that, you have to determine in what part, know this science exactly, is knowing where you're at. If you're here in the cold part or in the hot part, and if you're in the hot part, if you already passed precisely the crisis epileptoid, or if you still need to pass the crisis epileptoid, one can give or take. The more you know, the more you can predict when the crisis epileptoid is going to come. So there's variations, but give or take, you can get an idea when this part here comes, the most acute part, that if you pass it well, you already passed everything all good. Did you understand that part? Because it's important that you've understood. Watch this video multiple times, and once you understand that, you already understand the entire concept, the complete concept. Okay, what are the relays that I promised? Let's see if I have them around here. Yeah, and you already know that the diseases or all the organs controlled by the old brain are going to grow, they're going to shrink, and they're going to be destroyed. The ones controlled by the new brain are going to also reduce, they're going to stop functioning correctly. And here they're going to precisely produce mass to again reconstruct themselves, and they're going to return to good function. But the two parts here, they confuse them with malignant cancer, and in some cases, benign cancer. But there's no such thing as malignant and benign. The malignant are them.
The doctors, yeah.
The only malignant cancer that exists are the doctors that dress with a white coat. That's a malignant cancer, a murderous bacteria that comes, that's gonna kill you. But of course, only a charlatan can say that.
What charlatan?
A charlatan can say that freely. Crazy from the war, they'd say. Totally deranged. You've seen those people that return crazy from the war? Like that. He's crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. But that's the murderous virus. The one that puts on a white coat. That's the murderous virus. Very well. Let's see what else what did I just say I was gonna teach you? Ah, the relays. What the heck are the relays? Okay, the relays, you can change the name if you want to track, but I prefer relays because that's how I learned it. When I learn it like that, it stays. But there's also the name of tracks. Relays or tracks. What is that? What is it? They're things that get recorded in the precise instant of the DHS. In the moment that I receive the DHS, whatever it may be, because you know that DHS isn't something that you get drop by drop. It's not a daily pressure. It's a hit. As such, that's where it goes. In that moment, all my senses that are 5 are open, like this. And in the moment that I record the information of the DHS, I record it with my 5 senses. What I'm eating gets marked. What I was listening to gets marked. What I was smelling gets marked. And what I was touching gets marked. If my brain and my unconscious, that's quite uncontrollable, if it occurs to it to associate the DHS with what I was touching,
With the food or whatever.
let's suppose that I was precisely petting a cat and my dad came and slapped my mom, for example, and I was petting the cat. The kid was like so, touching the cat. Then comes the dad, drunk, and he hits a terrible blow to the mother, throws her to the floor. You know what class of DHS that is, right? But it got associated with I touching the cat. The cat. When touching the cat as an adult, I'm going to get in all this part an eruption so big that's going to be seen by a medic, wizard, murderous, malignant virus, and he's going to say, oh no,
You're allergic to the
are
cats."
allergic to the cats. And the cats deposit things. Take this little cream, take this little pill, and it'll go away. And don't touch any more cats.
Poor cats.
And don't touch any more cats. But what happens there? My brain
Associated that with the cats.
associated that terrible DHS that was a conflict of separation, because if they hit my mom, I feel separated from my mom. A brutal violence, many things. Was it a special part there? A special part?
It's not a DHS.
No, that won't give me a DHS. Okay. That specific conflict is going to get recorded
in such a way, if it occurs to my brain, that when I touch a cat, it makes me relive the hit that I saw, and it produces everything that it produced as a child. There's no one to stop it. There's no one to stop it. It could produce that. It could produce asthma. The bronchitis, for example. In the moment that I got the DHS that you have to discover, when was produced the DHS that gave me the bronchitis, what I was eating, what I was smelling, what I was watching, what I was hearing, what was I touching, because one of those five senses got attached to the DHS. And when I ate bread or whatever that my body relates that it has something to do with the DHS, immediately the bronchitis jumps out, just like that, immediately. And how is it that I can resolve it? The problem is that in the DHS, precisely is related to a relay. You already know what a relay is. There's sensory memory. Oh, I didn't define it for you, right? Okay, here it goes. Relays mean memories, sensory memories related with the DHS. Sensory memories related with the DHS. If precisely my girlfriend or my boyfriend abandons me and told me that I was ugly and he didn't want me, or I saw him with someone else kissing, and it was precisely because there's certain substances that the brain likes to associate. It was fall precisely or spring, and there was a little bit of pollen that I can't even see the pollen, but my brain has everything registered. It registered immediately because it likes, I don't know why, but it likes pollen, it likes peanuts, it likes cats, it likes maternal milk, that it relates to cow's milk. Why do you think that the people that can't drink lactose, you've seen that they drink cow's milk, they drink and they swell up? That you have to look for the conflict. When they were a baby. Then in some moment, they were drinking milk so calmly, the baby and the mother, or got mad at the husband, or something happened that she abruptly removed, and the DHS was formed there. And someday, that's a programmer, and someday in life, something somewhat unfavorable with the milk happened, and forget about it. Touch the milk, and there comes the brutal bloating.
It's like when it resolves again. How do you resolve that?
Well, okay, it's difficult to resolve them, because the ones that are recorded to the organs that pertain to the old brain, those don't understand reasons, not even by taking awareness. That's where the biodecoding fails, that people confuse with this medicine. No, what's important is this medicine. That is, the organs related to the old brain possibly don't want to understand reasons, not even understanding the conscious. They don't want to understand. The organs related to the new brain, that are all the problems with the skin and everything else, that one understands talking. And that one, when if you associate that I get the psoriasis because of this relation, the brain says, oh, look, now I notice it. There, no more psoriasis. But the other, that one's reptilian. That one doesn't understand little words. That one doesn't understand. When it occurs to that one, it occurs to it.
And everything
And
rots.
everything rots. The only form is entering the subconscious with various forms, various techniques. Hypnosis, for more than Ellen White and the Adventist Church and everything we've been told about hypnotism, that's putting yourselves in the devil's hands. And if they're hypnotizing you, all the spirits arrive and enter into your brain. Well, that's all the same stupidity of everything that they believe. Solely by way of hypnosis and other forms that aren't hypnosis but are similar to hypnosis, you can get to remove those parts. Because consciously, you won't remove it even if you pass the entire day repeating that. You won't remove it. You have to enter into the subconscious, because in the reptilian brain, the old brain, that one doesn't understand reasons. And if you don't believe me, make a serpent understand reasoning. It will not understand. It will not. No. A dog can. You can talk to a dog, because the dog has developed the other brain, that's our middle brain. That's the brain most similar to the modern brain. But a serpent, you will not make it understand anything. So then, the same thing occurs to us in that aspect. So then, there you do have to enter by way of hypnosis or of other similar techniques to correct those things that we can't correct consciously. Understood? I can't teach you those things right now, but so you know that yes, that hypnosis in certain cases is necessary if you want to resolve the problem. And if not, don't ever touch a cat, for example. Even though the thing of the cat gets resolved without hypnosis, but there's other things much more deeper. So then, if the girlfriend received the rejection of her boyfriend, or saw the boyfriend kissing some other person, and there just happened to be pollen in the environment, I don't know why the brain likes those kind of things. I don't know why. But in that moment, it recorded my boyfriend kissing another girlfriend, and I was smelling pollen. From here on out, every time that I sense the pollen, every spring, I'm gonna have asthma attacks. Brutal. That have nothing to do with my girlfriend, but there, it's done. Your brain dictated it to you. Understood. Those are the relays. Those are the relays. And as well as the music. A sound gets recorded. A sound that gets recorded when you received precisely that. Your mom was talking to you or whatever. It can, like it won't. It's not that your brain will record all of it. Your brain records all of it, but afterwards it chooses what it occurs to him to make the trigger with something of that. It's arbitrary. The brain does what it wants. It looks for it for the survival. It's not that your brain is bad. No, it looks for it for survival. So then, it chooses, it doesn't ask, it chooses something from everything that it recorded in that instant. And afterwards, it can make you relive it. Without having the DHS, you again have a DHS without even knowing why, and you have a DHS again. That's why it's important. Return to the day of the original DHS and tell everything that occurred, time of year, day, everything you remember, to try to decode what it was that was recorded. Yes, what were you telling me?
That is that. We return to the emotional question that is part of the attitude. If the emotion is very strong, how you react, then the brain chooses the predominant to record it and make the true DHF much more intensive.
DHS. Exactly. Like that. That's how it is. That's how it is. That's why we're at the mercy of what our unconscious does, of the emotions that we produce. Because we're the ones that can halt the emotion. Like up to this point, we were, all of us, until the moment that we learned the new medicine, we were animals that gave free rein to our emotions without controlling them, starting from the new medicine. Now we know that we have to control them. Because if not, if we don't try to control our emotions, we're going to trigger all kinds of programs. Understand that, right? Preventive. Exactly. This isn't only good for curing, but preventive as well. Because it teaches us to handle our emotions. We already know that if we have a big displeasure, I already know what's going to happen. And the first thing that I have to do is resolve it immediately. Very well. What happens? I'm already about to finish. Either way, because I want to give the second law only. Only the second law. The second law. I don't want to make it that long. What happens when a person can't achieve the solution of the conflict lysis? If they don't achieve the conflict lysis, well, there comes a time when the brain is very tired already for maintaining the individual in sympathetic atonia permanently, that it reaches a conflict lysis, and it has a name. It's called the pending conflict. That is that it drops the sympathetic atonia so you won't die. It drops it, but it doesn't mean that you resolve the conflict. It doesn't mean that. And it leaves it pending. And the moment that you resolve the conflict, the entire solution comes all at once, and without knowing why you got terribly sick. And it's because you had something pending. Are you understanding? Okay. Exactly. Because if it didn't do that, all of a sudden, the brain didn't do that, then you do die here. If it doesn't loosen that, you die.
Complete exhaustion.
Exhaustion, yes. Exactly. All your vital energy is right here. So then your vital energy is at full usage. But if you don't resolve the conflict, then the body resolves it for you. Not satisfactory, but it gives it a termination, but it leaves it in pending standby. In the moment that you can resolve something, it comes with full blast. This part right here, this phase right here. Understood? Old conflicts can arrive that are pending in our minds. Is this understood? Very well. Let's see with what I'm gonna. Well, there's a lot to explain here, but I'm not gonna continue explaining. For example, what happens when if I have lung cancer for fear of death, I begin to my cells begin to flourish, increase uncontrollably. The phase of the conflict active. When I resolve the fear to death, because I approached some guy that knew German medicine, and he tells me, "You're not gonna die. Stay calm. You're not gonna die. That cigarette there won't kill you." So then, what? So then, I end the problem. What happens? I enter into conflict lysis, and I need to decompose what was increased. I need some special bacteria, that is the tuberculosis. I need him. What do I need him for? To begin to break and decompose that. What happens when I don't have the bacteria? Because I was vaccinated my entire life, because they gave me all kinds of... What happens if I don't have? Well, the body has no other option than to encapsulate that entire part. And in the lungs, it has its problem to encapsulate that part. Because we want our lungs free, not encapsulated. So then it begins another series. And who has the problem of all this? And the damn malignant microbes that vaccinated us, and vaccinated us. For example, who here among us wasn't vaccinated against polio?
Everyone.
All of us. Be thankful that you didn't get polio, because the vaccine against polio doesn't save anyone. Absolutely no one. It was a lie so big, but I don't want to explain it. Give or take, in the years 30, 40 to 50, give or take, they began to use agrochemicals that are now highly prohibited. And it began a brutal epidemic of poliomyelitis. So then, when they prohibited them, already the poliomyelitis began to drop in rhythm as such, so you can kind of see it. These damned said, "Oh, business is leaving. Let's invent a vaccine." They invented a vaccine against polio. So then, it didn't have any effect. The disease was already dropping by itself. Are you understanding? That is, whether they put it or not,
No, thank you.
there was more chance that you'd get poliomyelitis if they put it, Much more chance. But they put it or not, it doesn't matter. If you were going to get it, you were going to get it. And if you weren't going to catch it, you weren't going to catch it. But they say, thank you to the vaccine, we eliminated almost the poliomyelitis. Lie! Absolute trash of these damned. It's a lie. It's a lie. The vaccine was never necessary, but they vaccinated us with all kinds of stuff that we do need. And that's how they completely ruin us, those damned. That's just an example. The vaccination didn't do anything except ruin us. Which in first place, they ruined us with agrochemicals that gave us precisely this inflammation in the brain, and they didn't want to recognize it. Afterwards, they recognized it, but they released a vaccine, and with that, you saw how the vaccine worked to eliminate lies. It was already eliminated because they stopped using their product. But that, you can investigate it if you'd like on the internet. It's shocking. The lie in which we live. The lie. Okay. Very well. So then, I'm going to explain to you, in SBS, that doesn't come from a DHS. Pay attention so you can learn something. To finalize, I'm going to explain in SBS, that's a special program with a biological sense that doesn't come from a DHS. Do you know what it is?
From one?
The orgasm.
Interesting.
The orgasm. All defined by the Dr. Hammer. Very well. He used the orgasm so that we'd understand the biphasic law of the disease. Here you understand clearly. Very well. So then, he caused this cold part this part without DHS, but it initiates something. He calls it the phase of falling in love, and the animal's excitement, or as well as humans' excitement, because we're precisely in sympathicatonia, excited. So then, all this part of sex, this part is the part precisely of falling in love or of the game prior to sex. This part. And the moment that the conflict lysis comes is when we perform immediately penetration, be it what it may be. This is the pre-game. We're code. It's the pre-game. We're very cold. You've never heard a woman say, I'm cold, I'm chilly. So then in what stage is she at? She's in sympathicatonia. And we wonder how. We want her heated. Hammer explained all this. I'm not inventing anything myself. So then we're cold, you see. I'm cold, I don't want anything. I'm in sympathicatonia. I'm somewhat occupied on my thoughts. So then we enter, that's how we enter in this part of the game that's going to lead us to being turned on. The hot part. The hot part. Now, when the conflict lyses, we reach termination to the cold amorousness to the act itself. The act itself, that's when we reach what? Vegatonia. For what reason? Because this part is the exudative. What happens with the penis? The penis swells like the same function. Eh? What happens in the organ? It swells. The organ swells. The vulva of the woman also inflames. The breast inflames. She begins to pant. She begins to get hot. I'm so hot. She begins to perspire. It begins all the parts of the PCLA of the orgasm. And when in the moment of culmination, and Hammer says that it forms not an edema, but it forms like an edema in the brain. And in the culmination moment, what comes? The crisis epileptoid, exactly, the orgasm. In that moment, one loses control. It lasts approximately from 10 to 20 seconds. And precisely there, isn't it like an epilepsy, the orgasm? One shouts, they throw themselves back, they say barbarities, close their eyes, pants. Some shout more, others shout, but it's a brutal crisis epileptoid. You're seeing it right there because he illustrated it with the orgasm. After this crisis epileptoid comes the cicatrization that he calls the flaccidness. Flaccidness, everything drops. It disinflates. Everything disinflates. The edema that was there leaves. Sometimes the woman wants more. What happened with your edema? And it left, he says. I expelled the edema. It left. The edema left. Everything stopped. The arousal stopped. And we reach flaccidness. I forgot to tell you this part in the disease. I forgot to tell you. You see that here, there's edema, no? There's lots of edema in the brain, in the organ, all over the place. And this part, they call it as well, the part in the stage, the pissing stage. Ugly name. What do you want me to tell you? They don't say urine. They say the pissing stage. Says Hammer, and it's the pissing stage. Why? Because all the edemas begin to micturate by way of the urine. The edema that left the brain goes directly to the urine. All the edemas go to the urine, but after precisely this. And in the orgasm, the exact same thing occurs. Because it's a marvelous program. We're cold, everything is cold, the female's cold, the male is cold, they begin to play, the things begin to heat up, we reach the solution of the conflict, and precisely in the exudative part, everything enlarges, everything edematizes, and afterward reaches an explosion. That's the epileptoid that everyone knows what it is, the epileptoid. And where the people scream, people shout, all kinds of things happen in that part. But now I'm going to explain more things that I didn't even know.
Let's see.
That I didn't know. But Hammer explained it to me in a marvelous form. And in this part comes the part of flaccidness. The edema leaves, everything leaves, like it came, it went, and how are we all left? Relaxed, calm. That's how the disease is, so you understand. He said the orgasm is an SBS, period. It's a special program of nature with a biological sense. Those that don't have orgasm, they lose out on all that, and they'll become sick from other things. So then he said, Hammer said,
Hammer said the orgasm comes, all of this comes to the cervix, the vagina, the rectum, the clitoris, and the penis. He says everything's included. It caught my attention what was said by Moses Hammer, the teacher. He says like this: the orgasm, basically two types of orgasm are known. Clitoral orgasm, penile, that is of the clitoris and the penis, and that corresponds to the right brain. That I didn't know. Hammer surprised me. To the right brain, that is that the orgasm of the clitoris and of the penis, the regular clitoris, regular that you are familiar with, in the clitoris and in the penis, that uses the right brain. And it's a panting respiration. Hammer defined it. The crisis epileptoid in the male is the ejaculation. In the females, the clitoral orgasm. The clitoral orgasm, or of the penis for men, as well as provoked manually or orally, that is, if the right side of the brain is occupied by a conflict. Manual or orally. That is, that what he's saying there is different from what you're thinking. Because precisely, if there's a big conflict in the right side, it can, an orgasm can leave in the male, especially in the male, when the right lobe is occupied by a big conflict. It says that by way of just talking, the male can have an orgasm because he forcefully has to occupy the left side. Something like that. Something like that. There's no need to understand it that much. So then it says, that is the first one, the orgasm of the clitoris and the penis. Now it says there's the orgasm of the rectum. Vaginal. That says the orgasm, Hammer said, the orgasm that corresponds to the rectal corresponds to the left brain. And it says, and it produces agonizing breathing. The other is panting. If it's of the clitoris, it's panting. If the orgasm comes by way of the rectal, or things that the Adventist Church say that it's a sin, we're talking about sin right here. I'm a complete charlatan. But here we're in the anal orgasm. Anal orgasm. The people are covering their ears. What? What the? We're in an anal orgasm that not all women can have. Hammer says he studied precisely how, by way of tomographies, it says it's obtained by the left brain and the respiration is agonal instead of panting. But if had a rectal vaginal orgasm simultaneously with the clitoral penile orgasm, it says this is what we call ecstasy of love. It says that if you're able to reach both things at once, the woman enters into an ecstasy of one of those. But this isn't in the churches that you used to go to. It doesn't occur. What occurs is the light off, no one sees nothing, and just have the least. That is if you're permitted to have, the Christianity says. And don't have a lot because you'll waste it. Totally. Don't have so much. Very well. Well, it keeps talking because this is really interesting, all this. In a feminine sexual conflict of a right-handed woman, the marginal orgasm is blocked. That he discovered. There's women that cannot have an orgasm. They can't. It doesn't matter how much you touch. It doesn't matter what you do. They're extremely blocked and they don't reach an orgasm. Hammer said, obviously, because they have blocked, by way of a sexual conflict, a part of the brain. On the contrary, in a conflict of loss of territory, that is, these are the, well, he put the example of the beta wolf, can have a clitoral orgasm or penile, and this can be provoked manually or orally in the male and female. Well, it has some parts that are very interesting because he talks a lot about the orgasm. Hammer. The orgasm in an epic crisis of a biological conflict of ectoderm
It says that the relays are precisely in the part of the peninsularis of the cerebral cortex, and it lasts like maximum 20 seconds, this epicrisis that we call orgasm. When orgasm isn't reached, it's possible that it's a subject of penile sensibility or clitoral and or vaginal. The sensitivity standard here is in the exterior skin, and there's a problem in the phase of conflict active. And it precisely says the sensitivity drops during the phase of conflict active, of a territorial conflict or of sexual frustration. So then, when a woman is sexually frustrated, it'll cost a lot to reach orgasm. A lot. When a woman has a conflict, or a man has a conflict of territory, if forget about it, what they least want is sex. They don't want sex. What they least want is sex because it's blocked, the sexual part. But it seemed to me very important to show you the orgasm in this biphasic law of disease because it's fulfilled exactly in all the periods. Because it's a special program, the orgasm. Very well. I want to read some quotes that were written by Voltaire. It was a thinker, French. That what I most remember of Voltaire is that Ellen brutally criticized him because the guy was anti-Christian, Voltaire. Okay, what did Voltaire say? He said like this, some phrases that are very good, spectacular. It says, the art of the medicine consists in distract the sick while nature cures him.
Interesting.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, because everything makes sense there.
Because one that knows, I can't do anything for you, but I can accompany you and tell you where you're at and distract you from fear and of all the things so you can fulfill the program. Are you getting it? That you fulfill that program. Imagine the modern medicine. How would they fix an orgasm? Cut the clitoris, cut the penis, everything. There's no more problem.
There's no more problems.
That's how it was solved before. The females that were hysterical, what did they do? They could remove the uterus completely. To that insanity they reached. So then the medicine continues to be the same trash as always. This phrase of Voltaire that I'm going to read right now is phenomenal. Pay attention. It's for you to write it and afterwards in the video. So you can write it and you keep it present. The doctors administer drugs that they know little of to cure diseases that they know even less to human beings to which don't know anything. So then, but that, I read that phrase and I can't believe how genius it is. It says that they know little of to cure diseases that they know less of to human beings that don't know anything about human beings. Imagine, what are they going to cure? The only thing they do is kill you. Absolutely kill you. And the last of Voltaire that I'm going to read you is, there's nothing more ridiculous that doesn't die of old age. Because if supposedly he should cure himself, how do you come to cure us? It talks quite bad of their science, right? So then Voltaire says, should die of old age. The next chapter, we're going to talk about the third law and probably the fourth, but this one's long because it's very important. The program of the SBS. That is the biphasic law. Now you understand why Hammer put the biphasic law of all SBS, because there are no SBS that don't begin in an active phase, doesn't end in the vegetonia phase. None of them. All of them have to have active phase and vegetonia phase. All of them. And all of them have to have precisely, what was CE? What was CE? What?
crisis epileptoid.
Very
Epileptoid.
well. Epileptoid. I'll accept epileptonic. Nothing happens. As long as you know it's a crisis epileptonic or penotonic or what you want, platonical, however you want. But it's a crisis maximum of the climax. The climax of the healing. You see, this one is the climax of the healing. The same as the climax of sex. It's precisely the orgasm of the curation, but it's brutal. And if you pay attention to how the orgasm is in sex, then this is going to be like that in the disease. It lasts very little, eh? It lasts very little, but it's the most dangerous of the sickness. Very well. Let's read Proverbs 16:32. Proverbs 16:32. And every time it's going to begin to have more and more sense. Better is he who is slowed to anger than the mighty. Now you're seeing the reason, no? Because he who angers a lot is going to have lots of SBS and they're going to die young. Bluntly, they're going to die young. So then, better is he who's slow to anger than the strong. Because the mighty is going to die faster. But he who slows to anger isn't going to die fast. So then, before we continue advancing, I'll tell you a real story. Some guy has 100 years. And another guy comes and says, wow, what's the secret? The secret that the guy had is that he never argued. He didn't argue anything. It took him a long time to get angry. Bluntly, he didn't get angry ever. Calm, the guy. He got to 100 years. No, nothing bothered him. No. His mission in life wasn't to change your way of thought. No, calm. He never argued, ever. So then some guy says, tell me the secret to get to 100 years and look very good as you. He says, I think it's because I never argue or contradict anyone. It can't be that, says the guy. Well, it won't be that then. So then it's not that. I'm sorry, I don't know what it is. That's how the guy is, you see? Because if the guy said, no, that's it. No, so it won't be that then. Right there, that's why he got to 100 years. But we start in the braid of the discussion. No, I believe it's that. No, I believe it's that. So then I reread Proverbs. It says, better is he who's slow to anger than the strong. And he who rules his spirit, than he who takes a city. Do you realize who's the strongest of all of them? The one that dominates his spirit. And precisely, if I dominate my spirit, I'm not going to get sick. I'm not going to pass through any SBS. And if I do pass through an SBS, it's going to be short because I dominate or control my spirit. My rebellious spirit, my avengeful spirit, my spirit, whatever it may be, I control it. I learn to, if I'm absolutely slow to anger, then it'll go much better in my whole life. Proverbs 25:28. Proverbs 25:28. Like a broken down city and without walls is the man whose spirit has no reins. More than clear. Look, where did we come to learn all this medicine? Elohim's telling you, like a broken down city and without walls that is totally unprotected, taken by whoever wants. Whoever who comes, it has no wall, it's totally without care. It says, so is the man whose spirit has no reins. And what's not having reins? Not being able to subdue their spirit. Their spirit is rampage. If one day he has to get angry, he'll get angry. If one day he has to fight, he's gonna fight. It's without control. Is that how it says? Without self-control? How does that version say? How does it say?
It says, a person without self-control is like a city with its walls destroyed.
Exactly. If they wouldn't have done so much noise. Let's read it again. There was a lot of people looking for the Bible there. Read it again.
A person without self-control is like a city with its walls destroyed.
Exactly. A person without self-control is like a city with its walls destroyed, crumbled. But that, don't we learn that all that is this? I don't have control. I'm going to end up very bad. Absolutely bad. And I'm going to die fast. Because I'm going to have high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, heart attack, and it's finished. And all those diseases, all of them, and each one of them, I could have prevented. And above that, if I had them cured. So then the only form that they truly can kill us is that someone kill us with something physical or that we reach old age. But no disease can touch me since I'm not scared. I already know what are the diseases. I know what the diseases are. But if we up until this point thought that all of them were problems and errors of nature. Look, I'm going to tell you one to conclude before the last thing I'm going to tell you. They brought to Hammer some cases of children with Down syndrome. Retards, as they always used to say. What happens with Down syndrome? They have an extra chromosome. In the chromosome 21, instead of being 2, there's 3. There's a genetic malformation, they tell you, those in white coats. And so then you're screwed. Hammer said, I don't know anything. The truth is, I don't know absolutely nothing of the Down syndrome. The only thing I can help you with, because precisely a mother that was a doctor, had a daughter that was completely down, with Asian eyes and everything. And so then he said, look, I can't help you because I don't know anything, said Hammer, because that goes outside an SBS that I know of. He says, but I can help you in something. Give me a computer tomography without contrast because that I can read, said Hammer. They took out a computer tomography of the girl, and Hammer said, whoa, here I see a double auditory conflict. So then he asked the mother, tell me, describe your pregnancy. Did you hear a loud noise? And the mother said, whoa, yes, in the first part of the pregnancy, I had to go to work. And they were constructing, and there was those jackhammers, dot, dot, dot. All day they would drive me crazy. Those sounds of the jackhammer of the construction. And afterwards I'd go to my house, and there my husband that manufactures furniture and organs and house said he'd be with the saw. A saw, an electric saw, said it was noise with noise. Because Hammer tells her, look, the truth, what I see here, is a double auditory conflict, but very big, a brutally big Hammer's focus at the little girl. That was Down syndrome. So then he said, look, what we could do to cure her now is to completely block her hearing, said Hammer. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. I don't know anything of this, but I see the conflict that's in the brain. They blocked the little girl's hearing completely. They did something like this, and they took her to a place that there was no noise. Zero we're talking about. Not even the sound of the voice of the mother nor the father. That is, they hardly ever talked to her. There was silence. In less than 2 months, that woman, or the girl began to normalize. At the year, she was completely normal. The Mongolism was completely gone. It was a normal girl. The doctors denied the fact. More people came with Down syndrome early because, of course, if you get it late, it gets fixed a lot. And the same auditory problem. Hammer did them he said, I don't promise anything, but I'm going to do the computer tomography. Let's see what problem is in the brain because he learned to read the brain. He said, again, 2 great auditory conflicts and again, permanent noises. Hammer took out in conclusion that Down syndrome is provoked when in the pregnancy are produced in the early phase a great conflict of permanent noise and in the late phase a great conflict of permanent noise. That makes such a degree irritates the baby so much that it precisely divides the chromosome. It divides so that to be able to survive. But if at time they reduce it and they help him in that aspect, says that the chromosome
Build.
auto rewrites itself again and it returns to normality. Tell me if that's not absolutely incredible. Because up to this moment, we thought that Down syndrome is another problem that God has here to explain. What the hell did you do with the creation? Suddenly, I want to have a normal son, and I get a son with Down syndrome. What did you do? Because it seems like an error in the creation. There's no register in the Bible or in any other ancient book of people with Mongolism. Where'd they come from? Are you getting that? In our society, we ruin everything. That's incredible. And the truth, incredible. And it's precisely, it teaches us something that the life that we have in this society gets sick, permanently sick. And there's so much more diseases that I'm going to talk about later. How the phones make us sick, how all this communication makes us sick, how they get us sick. But I'm going to explain it possibly in the next chapter in the part 3, because I believe that if I do, it wasn't as short this time anyways, but if I do it slowly, more is understood. And now, at the minimum, that you know, how is initiated our disease with the DHS, and when the DHS is initiated, you already know all the process that's biphasic, the active phase, the phase of curation, and with all the things that include the healing phase. All these are laws of Yahweh, because sadly, those that teach this medicine teach it from the perspective of evolution. And they say, because evolution. No, no evolution. All these are laws designed by Yahweh for our own protection, and as well so we can learn to be better people, because it tells us that he who controls his spirit is stronger than he who controls a city. A man who doesn't control his spirit, it's much easier to tackle and conquer than a city with the walls knocked down. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and watch this video multiple times until all these terms that I put here on the whiteboard, you can operate it as if it were something already natural for you. We're going to conclude with a prayer. Beloved Yeshua that is in heaven, thank you, Lord, we give you because you opened all this law, all this knowledge, magnificent, in the mind of Dr. Hammer, so that he could explain it to us. We thank you, Lord, because we see that there are no errors in nature, that we are the ones that fell, that the sin is ours, that we, for not obeying your laws, we get sick and we die. We give thanks, Lord, because in this time in which that we live in, you teach us today that we're alive to be able to cure ourselves and be able to prevent all these special programs. We ask, Lord, that you prepare us, and we truly desire that you return soon. We're wishing to see you return and go and live with you. All this, Lord, I appreciate. I ask forgiveness for our faults and our sins, and I give thanks for all this wisdom that you give us in the precious name of our Elohim, Yeshua HaMashiach. Alleluia. May the Lord bless you and keep you. We'll meet next Shabbat. We've passed a magnificent Sukkot. Truly fantastic. To my point of view, the best Sukkot to this date, and different and the rest. And truly, barely now we're recovering because everything is like a phase of the disease. When one has had, it's truly much pleasure in something. You enter in the part in which of relax. And now we're in the part of relaxing, and truly we rejoice in obeying these festivals of Yahweh. That the Lord bless you and keep you. We'll meet next Shabbat.